Welcome to the D-Shift podcast, where we provide inspiration, motivation, and education to help you transition from the challenges of divorce to discover the freedom and ability to live life on your own terms. Are you ready? Let's get this shift started. Hello and welcome to this episode of the D-Shift podcast. And I always say the two things that tend to bog down a relationship, if you take kids out of the picture, are money and the property, the real estate. So I have an expert here with me today who is going to demystify some of the things that people need to think about if real estate and real estate sales or purchases are going to be an issue during your divorce. I'd like to introduce you to Kat Timpson. She is a realtor with Coldwell Banker in New Jersey. She has over 20 years of experience in PR work, corporate communication, and now she specializes in helping couples going through divorce manage their real estate issues. And Kat, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, Marty, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Nice to talk about this difficult conversation, but really, really important.
Yeah, and this can be because what is that saying? The house is typically the biggest asset that a couple is going to own, right? So how did you, before we get into the real estate stuff, how did you get into real estate? Because it looks like you had a really cool career in corporate, I'm guessing, right? With all this PR and communication stuff.
Yeah, that was actually after I had been in media. I started in radio and went to CNN and then went back into radio. And then that usually begets something like public relations jobs, which I had for a long time. So I was learning branding and marketing and public relations, then took time out to actually raise my kids. During that time, though, we moved to the suburbs and we had over 5 homes over the past 25 years. And during that time, I upgraded or renovated or did something with them and I loved it. And I really became a buyer and a seller. By the time it was about 2016, a friend of mine was really going great guns with her real estate and said, "Can you come help me?" And I was like, "Sure." She's like, "You're the one that knows everything about being a buyer and seller. You should absolutely help people on both sides." So that was a really nice way to move into the situation because I knew what it was like to be the actual consumer on the other end.
Right. And I think that's interesting you said that because I think I was just reading somewhere that the average family in the United States moves like every 5.5 years or something now, right? Relocates. Is that?
Oh, interesting, Marty. It used to be about 5 to 7 years, and now actually it's moving up. So it's more like 7 to 10. So that's changed and that's really a function of what we see in our environment and economy now, which is, of course, that there are less homes on the market. So people are almost forced not to move as often. But in so much as anywhere between 5 and 10 years is not a regular day-to-day task.
Right.
And so much changes in real estate that's one of the things we're always grappling with as real estate agents is to help people understand what's happening. E.g., for example, when it was 20 years ago, people were buying houses, they thought that they should always offer a price under the ask. And that's not the case whatsoever now. But people who bought 20 years ago think it still is. So there's a lot that shifts and changes, and it is extending that even more so now.
Yeah. And thank you for that, because you're right. It really has property prices are and the availability, the supply on the market of the quality and the type of homes that buyers are looking for really impacts that. I just had a friend in Dallas who sold a house for, I think it was $25,000 over list price. And I was like, how on earth can you do that? I mean, it was a very expensive home to start with, but you know what I mean? It was a couple of $1 million home. It wasn't my kind of home. It was her kind of home. But, yeah, it's kind of mind boggling as a buyer to think you may have to pay more than what the seller even listed the property as.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm in a market in the Northeast and who knows what will happen soon. But for the past years, at least 5 years, things have been going really with gusto. And we've seen everything from over by 5,000 to over by 200,000. And it doesn't have to be in the higher end of the market. That can be actually in sort of the mid market, which is where a lot of people are able to make a purchase. And so there's a lot of competition. And whenever there's competition, there is going to be some sort of price war, some sort of multiple offer situation, and people are just scrambling. So they make offers wherever they feel like it will get them to the finish line.
Yeah, yeah. That's it, right? Supply and demand. If you want it, you're going to have to pay for it.
That's right. That's right. That's the other thing that's very hard to explain to people, right? I mean, feel terrible. We're not trying to up our commission or anything. It's just the reality is if you want a home in certain areas in certain really hot towns, it is what it is. It's supply and demand. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Kat, let's talk. And I mean, there's so much stuff that you can talk about real estate. It's such a huge topic about buying and selling homes. But I know that one of the things that you really specialize in is and have trained for is helping those people who are going through divorce deal with the family home. Why does it matter that as a person going through a divorce, I should seek out a realtor like yourself or a real estate agent like yourself who is trained in helping people through divorce?
Mardi, you're so right that it is a really big part of the divorce process to figure out who's going to live where. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. You're getting divorced, and by that premise, somebody's got to live somewhere and somebody's got to live somewhere else. And that's not what your situation is now. And if you own property, that means you have to decide one of several things. Either you're going to sell the home and everybody has to find somewhere else to live, or you're going to stay in the home and make that work, which is always odd, unusual, and very difficult, or somebody is going to buy somebody out. Any of those mean that there are a lot of decisions to be made, and there are a lot of things that can go wrong. And so I always say it's not just about having a real estate agent to help you with the selling of a property. You really want to talk to a real estate agent because that real estate agent is the middle of the wheel, right? All the spokes that come off of the real estate agent, lawyers, mortgage people, title people, they all should be involved in this decision because there are things that per each state make a difference. There can be certain states that won't, or certain mortgages even, that won't let you use your alimony for your mortgage for maybe 3 or 6 months. And that depends on, it can be state, can be mortgage, as I said. So things that people assume are not necessarily true. And what had happened 10 years ago that, your very nice, well-meaning neighbor told you is not necessarily what's going on now. So It's important to have somebody that can direct you to get the answers you need to make the most informed decision.
Yeah, unfortunately, too often people assume that alimony is going to be counted by the lender. And also another one that I hear all the time is, well, we've owned this house for 20 years. We're both on the mortgage. Therefore, we'll just take one of the partner's names, one of the spouse's names off, and the mortgage company will just go on about it. They don't. You have to requalify again in most cases, unless your partner will voluntarily go off. And I know there's some specific document you have to file, and they can sometimes get that done without having to go through the whole mortgage assumption thing. But that's getting less and less common from what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. It's really important because part of your house is both the deed and the title. So you have to have that clear, and you have to be able to, even if you don't have a mortgage, for example. So some people think, well, we didn't have a mortgage, so I can just walk out. Title needs to know that because that clears up what that property and who that property is owned by. There are also insurance insurance issues that come up. Somebody's the beneficiary if they don't live in the home, if they're the primary beneficiary or the primary owner of the insurance and they don't live in the home, that can be a real problem. If the home has a fire or some sort of disaster, that home may not be covered the way you think it would be. So it's very important that you don't just take it into your own hands.
Yeah.
And mortgage people can definitely help, but as we're talking about, people have a variety of ways that they finance things. Most people still have taxes to pay, even if they've paid off the mortgage, unfortunately. But even in a cash situation, it's hugely important to make it very legally clear who has ownership.
Right. And Kat, here's something I've heard the last little while, and I think it's a great idea, but I'm not sure. I mean, I'm asking you as an expert about this. If a couple's going through a divorce and it's fairly contentious, and there's no way that they can either buy each other out, nobody's going to be able to afford the home, or for whatever reason that's off the table, and they are selling the home, but they're both involved in the sale. Do you feel that there's an important point with both the husband and wife, or both partners, having their own real estate agent, or can one real estate agent serve both of them? What are your thoughts on that one?
So that's a great question, because I think that's the assumption, is that somebody can have a real estate agent on one side and the other. And really that makes it very difficult, because now you've got two agents on one side and ostensibly a buyer's agent. So you've got another agent. Everybody's got their lawyers, and it makes it complicated. But the truth of the matter is that's why people are trained to help people through divorce. So if I'm helping a divorcing couple, they are going to be my clients regardless of whether or not they're working together in the same room. So for example, I may have to communicate with one partner on text, but then it behooves me to make sure that that other partner knows exactly what I've said to partner number one, so that there's no sense of impropriety, that there's no favoritism. It's my job to be basically the house advocate and to not take sides. That said, it's not easy. And sometimes one gets put in the situation of being a referee, but being trained to understand that you're not the referee, that you have the right to say, I'm not the referee, I'm not your lawyer, I'm here to handle this for both of your futures, to make sure that you guys don't have any financial problems going forward. Because one of the things that often happens in divorce is people do, as you were saying, take things into their own hands, and they'll say, well, I'm not going to pay the mortgage. Well, guess what? When that kind of thing happens, that really ruins your credit going forward and ruins the opportunity for you to have a healthy buyer or ownership opportunity later in life. Even if you want to sell and rent for a while, you still may want to be a buyer at some point, and that can do serious damage. So it's important for a real estate agent who's dealing with a divorcing couple to at least have some semblance of understanding of the case and understand that they are working for both people. In my opinion, it works much better. It's hard. It's not fun, because neither person, if it's contentious, they don't like each other. Right. They don't want to be in agreement. That's another problem. It's really important to be keeping everybody in the loop and explain why a particular effort is being made. Sometimes you have to put money into selling a home. Sometimes it needs staging or decluttering or any number of things to prepare it, and that costs money. Who's going to pay that? How is that going to work? If you had two agents doing that for each of the couple on one side of the equation, it gets even more complicated. On top of that, you have family lawyers, because each person ostensibly has their own lawyer or legal person or team. And then you have a real estate lawyer for both the buyer and seller. You can see that the more people involved, the more complicated it gets. So my particular recommendation is to use one real estate agent on your side selling, if you have to sell, to work it out so that you have somebody who is absolutely 1000% on the side of your future and for both of you.
Okay, that's really informative. Thank you. Because I agree with you. There gets sometimes the divorce teams on both sides. I was recently called in to be a divorce coach for a client who already had like a couple of other coaches for something unrelated to her divorce. Then she had like 4 or 5 divorce professionals on her team, and her husband had like a collection, like a posse of about 8 people on his team. And I'm thinking, like, there's too much management here. So I did not work with her, because I just felt there's no way I could be effective, because she was trying to bounce ideas off of everyone. I'm like, no, that's, that's just adding to the problem. So I turned down working with her for that reason. But the more cooks are in the kitchen, the more problems there are getting the meal out on time. That's always the case, right?
I agree with that 100%. By the same token, I think that people think that, especially in divorce, that one person can help them, and that's almost always they think it's the lawyer. And the truth of the matter is, family lawyers, divorce lawyers, most lawyers either have a lot going on or they often practice different practices, right? So hopefully you're dealing with somebody who only deals with family law. That whittles it down, but also they are not a real estate agent. They don't know what the market is doing. They don't know what the mortgage rates are. They don't know how to make sure the title is okay. They don't know where the taxes are. All they can do is get a handoff of a mortgage release or a tax report from the town, but that doesn't make them an expert. And I think a lot of people just say, oh, I'll use my attorney.
Right.
And quite honestly, we're already behind the 8 ball when people say, oh, I'll just use my whatever attorney to do real estate instead of a real estate attorney, because that alone makes for difficulty. A real estate attorney knows the state laws about real estate,
Right.
and they're different for every state and they're complicated. And so somebody says, oh yeah, my brother-in-law is a litigator in one state and he's going to take care of this. Not that literally makes the realtors go,
Yeah.
it's not. It's just, we know that there's going to be a problem because they don't have the language, they don't have the resources to understand how to negotiate this particular kind of deal or situation. So it's important to have specialists, but it's important to have a team.
Right.
And to your point, you can have too many people, but if you have somebody who is specific to each area of what you need, then that team should be working together. And that's something that actually I practice. I have a group of people that I almost always work with as a group to make
Right.
sure that clients are getting, not because you have to buy one and get them all, but there will be different people who are needed at different points in the process of a divorce. And it's hugely important that those people know they're working together, know who they're working for, have your back, and understand the premise of not getting into this in terms of being partial.
Yeah, and not all, and I want to really stress this, not all of these people you're going to have to even pay anything for. Sometimes you can just do a consultation call. Like a realtor, you don't actually pay a realtor. It comes out of the proceeds from the property. So it's not like you have to pay anything up front. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind, because when people say create a team, they're like, oh yeah, a bunch of professionals just looking for money. A lot of these people, you're not ever going to have to come out and pull out your wallet or write your check or give them your credit card. So and think of the thousands of dollars that you could be leaving on the table if you don't sorry, go ahead. No, I cut you off.
I was going to say it's a very good example of what, just to go back very quickly, is I know there are people who think that they can use certain monies to buy out or maintain a mortgage, and they can't. And what a rude awakening that is. So why not speak to the mortgage person ahead of time? And like a real estate agent, they too are not paid unless there's a deal. So basically it's free advice.
Yeah, it absolutely free advice. And that's what I was going to tap into a little bit here too. Kat, you have some really good advice about what people should think about if they're going to consider selling their home as part of their divorce settlement. Can you share just some information or common mistakes or common thinking things that are just absolutely not true in the real estate world?
Oh, for sure. I think that one of the most important things, and this sometimes is state dependent, but people forget that if they're getting divorced, having lived in the home for a while, more than 5 years, often more than 10 years, that home is not the same structure it was when they bought it. So one of the big things I always recommend is that they have a pre-sale inspection. And I say that because once you are divorced, property is done. You can go back sometimes, in some cases, and change some of the notes in a divorce settlement, like child support, or if somebody loses a job, certain things can be modified. With property, the minute you're out and signed, you're done. So it's really important to know what the issues are. Say one partner is going to take the home and the other is going to buy them out. Well, what's the value of it? The value is what the house needs. It's not just what you could get on the open market, it's what it needs. So say there's a house and we think it's worth $5 and we've got savings and bonds, stocks that are worth $5, and we take that, we split it, because in New Jersey, for example, it's equitable distribution. So $5, $5, you go your way, I go mine. Now I have a house. Great, it's worth $5 until you find out that the boiler doesn't work, the roof leaks, and you've got a lot of things that you need to put into that. Now you've taken away from your value of $5. Now it's $4, maybe even $3. The other person's walked away with $5. You've only got an equitable asset of $3, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's very important when you are still together to understand what the asset is worth and valued at, and to use the monies that are the joint monies for the house as best you can to solve the problems. It also helps with sales. If you are going to sell, if you've had a structure that's been there for a while, there are often problems, and some of those problems need to be addressed before selling. That is not the same as saying you need to renovate your bathrooms and your kitchens and do everything over. That's not the case. But if you have a leak that you're not aware of, it's darn sure going to come out and you're going to have to deal with it. And it's so much better to deal with any of that ahead of time, because you're already anxious once you're getting divorced. If you're in the middle of a sale and it's going somewhere and it gets held up because there were things you should have taken care of ahead of time, it's a problem. The other thing is, even though in theory, yes, you don't pay anything until you sell a home, the truth is in our marketplaces, almost everywhere in the US, it's imperative that you present the home in its best light in order to get the most value out of it from the market. So you may have to put in some money. You may need to give it new garage doors, which strangely are one of the things that are the biggest value add. I don't know why, but you may need to have somebody come in and remove a lot of things that you own together because it's just too cluttered. There are costs. I mean, those are costs, but they're good investments because they allow the home to be shown in its best light. When a home is shown in its best light, it gets much more attention. When you have more attention, hopefully you have competition. If you priced it right, competition leads to better prices, et cetera, et cetera. So there's investment, but when you're getting divorced and everybody's fighting, I didn't agree to pay for that. I'm not doing that. You pay for that. You wanted to sell. It's messy. And so some of those things are really important to be dealt with ahead of time. Again, the other thing is, for example, making sure your title is clear. If you didn't realize when you bought the house that the title had a problem, it's sure as heck going to hold things up when you go to sell it. So that's another really important part. And again, the aforementioned, make sure you know what insurance is going on, who's going to be living there, is there a primary on the insurance? They need to either live there or they need to change that. There are just all these little things that I think are much better done ahead of time.
Right.
Because no matter what, Marty, the process of divorce, if it's contentious, and often even if it doesn't start contentiously, ends up that way. So it's only going to get, and I use the word worse, but it's only going to get more challenging as you go on. So I always recommend do as much upfront as you can while there's as much good feeling left as possible.
Yeah. And I've heard, again, as a coach, you don't typically get the people that are happily going through the divorce. You only get the people that are having challenges, like you say. I've had so many cases, like I'm in Texas, it's a community property 50-50 split. That does not mean 50-50. Like it's not, there's a whole bunch of exceptions and caveats and ways to work around this that really savvy experts can work around it. And there's so many misconceptions. I had one case where a woman stayed in the house. Her husband, she thought, was paying the mortgage. All of a sudden, she gets a foreclosure letter, and she doesn't realize that she doesn't get out of 50% of the debt and just gets 50% of the assets. It's like you're both losing. And so thank you for pointing these out, because, real estate, selling a house on your own, all of those kind of things, it's dangerous because it's not what you know about it that's going to be the problem. It's what you don't know. And nobody's going to help you with that. If you're selling a home, nobody's going to point out, you could be asking the buyer to pay the closing costs and all this kind of stuff. But your realtor can help you with all of that and maximize your profits. So, yeah, Kat, thank you.
I'm so sorry. I was just going to say it's so important that there are scary stories. Not everybody's going to have one. But I, too, had a client whose husband had, while they were doing renovations, he had snuck in a HELOC, a home loan that she signed off on. And when they went to get divorced, there was absolutely no equity in the house. None, right. Zero. And she wasn't aware. So when you go over things like that information with the mortgage person ahead of time, they check all that. Yeah. So no surprises.
Yes, those HELOCs are bad. I've seen that. I've heard the same thing. And here's the thing. Technically, you are still entitled to 50% of whatever that equity was, but you cannot get blood from a stone. If there's no money, there's no money. And so knowing in advance is always so important. Kat, I feel like we could go on for another hour at least on all this because you are such a wealth of knowledge. But what do you think out of all of the stuff that you work with people? What's the most important point about the real estate during the divorce that you'd like to kind of sum up this podcast with?
Sure. I think that the most important thing is to recognize that you're going to be in a very heightened emotional state, but real estate is business. It feels like it's all about emotions, where our kids were raised, where they came home and we had dinner after that fabulous Halloween party, who won what award, and remember when all that happened, remember they moved to this bedroom and not that, right? So there's all that tied into it. But the truth of the matter is, if you can do your very best to take that emotion out and look at it as a business asset, it can make a difference, because we know that it's the emotions that keep people fighting for, I want the remote, no, you get the remote, no, I want that plant, you get that plant, I want that. It's little things, but it's not about the things, right? It's about the emotions attached to it. So if you can do your very best to detach from the emotional process, and by the way, Mardi, selling a home, no matter when, buying a home, selling a home, real estate's hugely emotional in the best of circumstances. And now you're putting an incredible strain on that process. It's very, very difficult. So if you can be thinking that ahead, it may get you just a little bit further than those who don't even think to consider that.
Great words of wisdom, Kat. Thank you. If people want to find out more about what you do or want to work with you in the New Jersey area, what's the best way to get hold of you?
Sure. So Kat.Timpson is pretty much my handle wherever you go. If you Kat.Timpson, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and of course, just look up a real estate agent by their name and you'll find them, because we have to be very, very public figures. So almost always, wherever we are, whatever brokerage we're in, you'll be able to find our cell phones and our emails, if not our websites, which we all have as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I know I've learned a lot, and I think we probably need to have you back for more in-depth looks at a few of these things. So thank you, Kat. Really appreciated you being here today. I'd like to thank everybody for listening into this episode of The D Shift, and don't forget to tune in to the next one. Thanks for listening and supporting the D Shift podcast. If you would like to attend live trainings by our amazing guests and have a chance to ask questions and get answers from our experts, join the D Shift crew. For more details and to sign up, head on over to www.divorcecoachforwomen and click on the podcast page.